on the internet, you have probably heard of dopamine, especially dopamine detox, and how it's why you struggle to do anything and enjoy life. Which, that isn't necessarily wrong, a little exaggerated perhaps, but not for the reason that you might think. So, just a quick backstory. Dopamine is a chemical created in your brain. It's a reward chemical, like oxytocin and serotonin, that releases when you do things that your body registers as good. What your body registers as good and what your conscious mind believes is good may disagree, but it'll still release it. And when it's released, it activates positive signals in the brain, and that links the memory of that thing to good feelings, kind of like a Pavlov trigger. So over time, your body is conditioned to pursue anything your brain registers as good. Dopamine, of the three, is probably the most commonly talked about for this because it is the fast reward chemical. So of the three, it is created and released when you do a good action, and it's also considered the motivation chemical for the same reason, because it drives you to do things. This is versus serotonin, which is the happy chemical produced by having a healthy lifestyle, which includes diet, exercise, sleep, and sunlight, and oxytocin, the love chemical, which is produced by doing bonding activities, like giving gifts, sharing time, and touch. So while these also improve your life, obviously, the effect is probably less drastic and immediate than dopamine, which can drive you to perform actions that can drastically change your life. So, why does this matter? Well, again, as you've probably heard online, dopamine affects your life enjoyment and motivation to change and grow. Allegedly, this is because of too much dopamine, social media, screens, on demand, and fast ordering, which creates an abundance of positive, good-feeling reward system because the sensory activation and stimulation trigger a dopamine release. So anytime you see a cool video, hear a cool song, and eat delicious food, whoosh, there's a dopamine release, which is kind of true, of course. But the reason that I explained how dopamine works is it also explains what is wrong with this logic. So yeah, there's sources of dopamine everywhere, but dopamine is also natural. It's produced by your brain to help you, to motivate you. We wouldn't do anything without dopamine, so you need dopamine. The problem is not the amount, it's the focus. Basically, dopamine is a built-in reward system that trains you on how to live your life. The only problem with that is there's a ton of passive sources of dopamine that the only thing required to get dopamine is to sit there and wait to be rewarded. Just sit and wait. So, as a result, you become trained to just sit there and wait. And then you get dopamine. And you get really good at sitting there and waiting passively. And then you wonder why you can't do anything when literally your brain system has been training you to do that, to passively sit there and wait, because it thought was helping you. It thought the thing you were doing was good, and so it released the dopamine, and your brain and body associated sitting passively with good things. So instead of learning to go out and do something, anything, move, learn, experiment, to get dopamine, you just wait. So as a result, you learn to be passive, not active. And that is the real problem. Because it's basically the equivalent to what we do with pets. which is okay for pets, but not as great for humans. What we do is we feed them regularly in the same bowl, in the same place every day. And sometimes with dogs, we even tell them to sit for their food. And as a result, when you put a pet in nature, they aren't motivated to search for food. Not only do they not know how to do it, there's nothing triggering them to go get it because their brains aren't trained to be active, but passive. So, what can we do about it? Sure, you can try a dopamine detox. It might work pretty well. Works for some people. But the one key thing about dopamine is it's a training tool. And in training anything, adding is easier than subtracting. So if you're trying to fix your motivation and fix your life, it's going to be way easier to learn to add a new skill or habit than to unlearn one, to try and subtract it, because of the way the dopamine works. It releases when you do something, not do something. So you're going to get more reinforcement every time you do an action towards what you're aiming for. So, because of this, a better strategy that might be a little easier to stick to is to pick one skill or hobby to try, preferably one that you have some familiarity with, so you know that you're going to enjoy it already, so that you know you're going to get that dopamine rush. And every day, just spend 5 to 10 minutes practicing learning that thing. It doesn't have to be a lot. In fact, it's actually better if it isn't a lot, because a short time, it's just enough to release the dopamine while it still leaves you wanting more for tomorrow. And this is similar to phone games or gambling, because the way dopamine works, your dopamine receptors, they're going to, when dopamine releases, you only have a certain amount of dopamine receptors. So if you get some of it, they're going to start craving more. But if you get a lot of it, they get all used and they don't want the dopamine anymore. They're satisfied. So by doing a little bit, it's just enough to activate the dopamine receptors and trigger a connection without fully satisfying them, so that you no longer have the desire to do the thing. And that creates more desire to do the thing that you are actually trying to do, which is what we want. And so, as a result, if you do this way, over time, you won't just, improve and learn whatever you're trying to do. Your brain slowly gets trained, it gets Pavloved to think of this thing as fun and rewarding. And it'll want to do it even more, even if you don't plan it. It'll want to do it spontaneously. Similar to how, if you think of the first time you ate a dessert, it was really, really good. And then even if there wasn't, a dessert right in front of you, you would still think of the dessert and want the dessert. It's similar with training your brain to want something else. And over time, it'll become more attractive and rewarding than the things that you want to stop doing, like scrolling your phone. Because of the dopamine training, it'll become a fun activity, but also you get a long-term reward from it, unlike the passive things that you feel like doing but may not necessarily feel like good for you. Because you don't get a long-term reward, you don't get as much dopamine satisfaction than if you did something like dance, learn a new skill, go out with friends, creating something, experience something, etc. Anything like that, anything active. And the other cool thing is, once you've gone through this process and you've developed a new habit, a new hobby, whatever, you can actually repeat that, and it'll be a little bit easier because your brain knows what to expect. And so you can just use the same system over and over and over again, and then eventually you'll just have trained your brain to go from being used to being passive and waiting to being active and looking for new things to do. Because it'll learn that it's more rewarding to go out and try new things than to just sit and wait to be fed by any fast food, fast videos, whatever. Well, hopefully this helps. If you've struggled with this, let me know in the comments. And if you've tried this, let me know as well. I would love to hear your experiences. I know I've definitely struggled somewhat with this, if you couldn't tell. This strategy is what finally worked for me, so I really wanted to share it. So if you want a video on some good skills and hobbies to learn that are easy and simple to start, let me know, because there are complicated hobbies and simple hobbies, and maybe it can be a little overwhelming at first. So just let me know. Other than that, be brave, be strong, be kind, and be the change that you want to see. Bye-bye.